From colonial conquest to post-independence plans, and now a modern wave of gentrification. Communities erased, histories undone, urban transformation leaves tangible scars in its wake. The seeds of Lagos's spatial conflicts were sown long ago. Post-independence Nigeria inherited a disjointed urban planning system from its British colonial masters, a system built on segregation that has persisted into the present day.
British philosophy of urban design is not assimilation, it's segregation.
The kind of socio-spatial or segregation that we observe in Lagos today has got a long history. It stems from colonial legacy of planning laws and regulation that entrench socio-spatial inequalities and exclusion in our urban space in Lagos. And notable among these laws or regulations include the 1904 Cantonment Proclamation that established government reserved area, GRAs. And also, when you look at 1914 Ordinance, which entrenched or established acquisition of land, compulsory acquisition of land, this usually results in displacement of natives.
By 1928, there was the Lagos Town Planning Ordinance. The focus was, first of all, get rid of old and derelict buildings. Of course, we know that this had to do with rats, bubonic plagues. All those ones were regarded as rat-breeding buildings, had to go. Not only that, cleaner drainages, construction of planned markets, provision of housing. This were more or less fallout from the bubonic plagues, so that areas, Okwawu, Elegbata, Idumagbo, Isalegangan, Idugoran, all these were more or less cleared.
These planning regimes resulted in the creation of GRAs, exclusive enclaves that continue to reflect the socio-spatial legacies of colonial rule.
Most of these GRAs, they have this unplanned area where, because to beat the cost of transportation, people just choose to find a space in a place where they can trek to their master's place or to their place of work. And that's why we have Maroko then growing in that size to surface Victoria Island people. We have the Apapa GRA, we have the Ajegule slum, we have the Suruleres, we have the Mushi, we have the Magodo, which was actually after independence. GRAs of this war, we have Shangisha. So we have Ogudu GRA, we have Ojota slum. So for every GRA, there is always a slum.
When you bring all of these regulations together or these laws together, what we saw was that they established that kind of segregation socio-spatially, and which can still be linked to what we experience today, the issue of GRAs, where you have government reserved areas or the elite enclaves that are well provided for at the expense of the everyday people where they live. And this also has a kind of implication and the kind of displacements that we experience in contemporary Lagos.
As at 2020, as identified by the Lagos State Urban Renewal Agency, LASURA, over 140 communities in Lagos are categorized as informal, slum, or squatter. As Lagos continued on the path of urban growth and expansion, elite estates expanded, and the lands hitherto occupied by their service communities appreciated in value. The people who once provided essential services were suddenly seen as an aesthetic nuisance and an obstacle to development. From 1900 onwards, colonial planners carved the city into racial and economic hierarchies. The government reservation areas for Europeans and the Brazilian quarters for returnee slaves. These and other events shaped the practice of the spatial divide during this period.
The most outstanding one was in the 1950s. There was also an attempt to clean central Lagos of swamps. It was to involve about 70 acres. Central Lagos, what we now call the CBD, the Central Business District, to ensure that because there was mosquito, there were problems. Of course, all these broad streets, the alleys were very narrow, flowing gutters and whatever. So the colonial government wanted to have what we can call a modern approach to construction and whatever. Lagos was touted as one of the most dirty cities, even though it was also regarded as the Liverpool of West Africa.
Additionally, there were increasingly crowded native quarters for the indigenous populations and other groups of people referred to as native strangers. This also led to segregation policies in Lagos.
The whole idea of creation of Sabo, what we now call Sabo, for what we can call native strangers, started in Kano, Fagge. There were people who were selling cows and whatever. So instead of bringing them livestock into the center, why don't you stay at outskirts? Today we still have cattle market at the outskirts of Lagos. So that was the original thing before it was now adopted by C.L. Temple, who was the Lieutenant Governor of Nigeria, particularly between 1909 and 1911. It was when Lugard took over that he now promoted that one as a government policy. Today now you have people, native strangers as they were called, living in separate areas called Sabo.
In the early 1900s, Lord Lugard described the situation in which European and African habitations were intermixed as an obviously undesirable arrangement.
The Colonial Health Ordinance became a kind of spatial control. For example, the sanitary clearance that were implemented in areas that were considered as overcrowded. I mean, those measures were justified on the basis of addressing health issue or for health measures. But in reality, the reasons were very clear in the sense that the land belonging to African or the local communities, I mean, is a way to take those land for European commercial and residential uses or interest. And by that, by 1960, when Nigeria got independence, it was very clear that Lagos already inherited a kind of planning system that promoted segregation.
Independence brought new leaders but inherited the colonial blueprint of socio-spatial exclusion. Successive post-colonial governments remained entangled with the colonial legacy of exclusion and displacement under the imperative of urban modernization.
The pattern was methodical. Ibioro in 1973, Adenija Adele in 1975, Iponri and Central Lagos in 1976, Alaba Market in 1977, and Oworonshoki in 1980. Each eviction followed the same script: sudden demolition, minimal compensation, and no genuine resettlement.
I mean, then came July 14, 1990. In the early hours of morning, bulldozer accompanied with military forces stormed Maroko. I mean, a community that housed more than 300,000 people was completely demolished. Though the reason, I mean, they justify the demolition based on health or flood risk reason, I mean, that they are trying to save the people from flooding or vulnerability to flooding. The real reason was very clear, that is a way of taking the land from those people who were already occupying the place.
We just heard on radio that they will demolish Maroko in 7 days. cewa mu waye gari lafiya daga nan sashen Hausa na muryar Najeriya Lagos.
Precisely that 14th of July, they came in with all manners of military, the soldiers, the armed police, the thugs, caterpillar, even they came with coffin and Black Marias everywhere. Maroko was under siege.
It actually started on July 14th and lasted until July 25 of 1990. So that was 17 days of evictions. As at the count that was done then, they said over 300,000 people were displaced in one eviction. And that 300,000 people was, a lot of analysts say it was just a fair and modest estimate.
Everybody was in shambles. People are dying virtually on a daily basis. Getting sick, high blood pressure, many people were arrested. There was a serious outcry nationally. The government were ashamed. So what we end up doing when we are out for almost 1 week, naturally everybody now started looking for any government estate that is vacant. That is how people like my parents and so many other people find their way to Jakonde, Ekota, and Epe. We find our way into space where we can accommodate our families. We came into these places. Those places was a deep forest. We were practically living with reptiles. We were drinking water from the pit where the construction job was done.
Units, unfinished, no window, nothing, but they just moved their bags to this thing. So those who didn't have any of this one, they got bare land and put their canopies and makeshift structure where they put their head. And it is like 3 months after, the same government say, we push you away from one place. You invaded another place, sent another group of soldiers to evict them. It was that killed his father. So he said he just went out one day and saw his father, who actually was able to secure an apartment. By the time he came back, he said, he now found himself under a canopy.
That particular night, myself and my dad now was practically outside. Around 6, 7, it was heavily raining.
And he just saw his father bent down inside that rain, under that canopy. It's a few days after the man died.
It was a terrible experience.
After significant local and international outrage, the government attempted to allocate houses to some of the victims of the forced eviction.
The government insisted on wanting to interface, because of the outrage that happened then, interface with those that had title documents. Remember, because of the force with which the evictions happened, a lot of people were running helter-skelter, a lot of people had lost their title documents in the evictions, so it was only about 4,800 landlords that were able to produce title documents. And out of the 4,800, it was only about 2,600 that were eventually located to the Ekpe, Ekota, and Elasan housing estate.
One would have thought this would provide at least some closure for those who received allocations, but characteristically, it never did.
Some of the people that received allocation papers to go to Ekpe, to go to Ekota, to go to, some of them got to the ground and met uncompleted buildings. Some people met just vacant plot of land on the land without any structure on it. Some made an attempt to erect, and they were told they didn't have the power to erect. So this created more tensions. When they went back to the authorities to try to regularize these concerns, it is a violation, because you have an instruction, resettle.
To understand the why of this eviction, we must look to both the past and the present. They reveal more than meets the eye.
BI was meant to be for the upper class. And of course, in spite of the fact that it was meant for the upper class, they needed cooks, drivers, and what have you. And so where would they stay? Of course, in the slums, in the eastern part of VI, which later became Maroko. And of course, later it became an urban sprawl with all the features of a slum. Well, the government felt it will affect the aesthetic value of VI. And in order to make the area more secure, there was a need to get rid of the people. Other people felt, look, it was just a ploy for the elite, particularly the property class, to take over that portion.
We looked at the lands taken over, and what is on them gives you a pointer to what was the driver for the demolition. In Maroko, for you to understand this clearly, you have to look at what are the circumstances in which a state can revoke the right of occupancy. Section 28 of the Land Use Act makes that clear, and it says for overriding public interest, and even defines what amounts of overriding public infrastructure, public utilities, and all of that. Was Maroko demolished for overriding public interest? Let's look at what happened to Maroko. That will tell you whether it was for overriding public interest. What sits on Maroko today is the British International School, Oniru Estate, the Lekki Phase 1, part of Lekki Phase 1. These are the things that are now on the former Maroko land. Are any of these public projects or privately owned projects? That gives you a pointer to why this land was taken in the first place. Because if you see the mansions, if you see the high-rise, the affluent neighborhoods that are reconfiguring those landscapes, it gives you a pointer to why, whose interest was being pursued to take these people away.
I think people have more than enough ground to be suspicious of the true intention of the government. One, you take over the area, say, either under the guise of slum clearance or whatever. At the end of the day, you sanction the place and redistribute it to the high and the mighty, even without proper consideration for the people who are displaced. I think it's just a matter of looking how do you balance the so-called public interest, and who determines even what is in the public interest anyway. Yes, you say the government. At what cost and at whose expense?
We can see practically that when the demolition occurred, it was the bourgeoisies that eventually occupied those places. It was not just for override public interest. It's the money bag in Nigeria that eventually occupied those places. So we can see under our nose that because our parents are less privileged, because probably they are uneducated, probably because they are not rich.
And what you see today is that the place has been renamed as Victoria Island Extension, has transformed really into one of the prime areas in Lagos, or even in Nigeria, and by extension Africa today. And you see a generation of people that has grown up displaced and living with the trauma of displacement today and considered as being dispensable in the city, that is undervalued and don't have the right to live in the city or have the benefit of the city. And that is what we see happening. And that raises question of socio-spatial injustice.
The new locations where the evictees were relocated were largely uninhabitable, marked by years of government neglect and a complete absence of social services or infrastructure. In the vacuum left by the state, local developers and international NGOs stepped in to offer what support they could.
We say, okay, they want to regenerate those places they put out because they are not quite habitable. Most of the places we settled down in, as at that time, was under construction. The state government turned a deaf ear. All this while we are pursuing for justice. We took our case as far from Federal High Court to appeal, from appeal to Supreme Court. The errand of technicalities in judiciary becomes a norm of the day. Now, one way or the other, the government frustrated all effort for our parents to get justice. They took the case back again to the High Court as a starter. These old men, as at this time, were relatively getting weak and tired.
As the old men grew weary, their children took up the struggle, only to inherit the same cycle of government neglect. Now, urbanization has once again caught up with these areas, turning them into prime targets for another round of government-led development.
When Elason Estate, when they were relocated to Elason was the end of Victoria Island. That was the last. After that, you don't see any other thing. The chevrons, the Lakey Phase 2, the down, all the way to it, but they never existed. So the last structure visible, so everybody thought that this is the last, and this is the end of Victoria Island. There's no development. Nobody's going to see them. Let's hide them here. What happened? So what eventually happens is that when development catches up with that area and land prices and values skyrockets in that area, the appetite that drove them out of where they were, the same appetite and interest holders connive, sometimes with the state, to get them and push them further. And development comes to that place, they repeat the same cycle. They get to that point, they repeat the same cycle. So go to develop, and that is not only peculiar to Nigeria. In most places of the world where evictions have happened, that has been the practice.
The Lagos State Commissioner for Housing explains the plans of the current government for the evictees in the settlements.
What we decide to do is that we decide to have a committee of the association from Maroko. They were there, and we have to start talking to them. What do you really want us to do? And some of them will either opt for money or you opt for units, because there is no trust in government. You cannot tell them that, okay, let's do this for you in the next 5 years, come back, or the next 2 years, come back, or let us raise money for you to go and rent a place and come back, even if you have to do that. There's no trust in government. So the people would rather prefer that we sort this thing out once and for all.
It is not a perfect settlement. If you ask me and ask the large majority of our people, ultimately what we really want is regeneration of where we are currently living, across board, all the estates. But again, instead of us to keep living in these wounds and carrying out these pains forever, we consider just looking for a succor, a way to appease to our people that it is what it is, the kind of country we find ourselves.
This one at Ilasan today, if they should leave Ilasan on agreement, no one is feeling cheated. It's win-win for everybody. And that's what we are saying. If we are saying that if you want to evict a man, give him choice. But until they even understand that what we are telling them is the best, that the value of this land is so high that you can accommodate all, that there will be joy, there will be happiness. Those people, they want to live there, accommodate them there. Those that want to move there, they will move there. We can still live together and be happy together until they will get to that point that there will be no need to move them to Ekpe and dismantle their social network.
The government, in its own wisdom, put aside some units for those who insist. And where do we have them? We have them in Sokotedo, we have them in Ibeshe, and we also have Odonosa. We are also adding Badagrina. So what are we doing? If you insist in being paid monthly, if you insist financial, that if you want financial, we give it to you. Then if you insist you want a unit, we tell you where they are, and we also put in some money for you to be able to. Then those people that were on the that are just that actually do not have business there, but just create, we pay them. We negotiated those people, those who came with options of what they would prefer, and then we agreed, and then we were able to move them.
We equally agreed that the exercise, the demolition of the estate is not going to be at once, that the estate is going to be clusters into units. Then, and the settlement plan too is not going to be at once. So we want to equally measure the readiness and the preparedness of the government if they have the houses and if they have the finances to carry out this exercise. So we cluster the estate into 13 units. So if you have paid unit A, or let me say unit 1 or cluster 1, and if you are done with that particular process, giving it their money, their house and everything, you can demolish. We will monitor the process. So we are having our information, the government is having the information. We are monitoring the process of who have been paid, who have not been paid. So when we are done with cluster 1, then we can move to cluster 2. You do the same process until we get to the 13 clusters. So Jakonde was divided into 13 clusters. Fortunately, sometime 4 months ago, we were able to close cluster 1. They have paid everybody. The people that are not paid, that we couldn't locate, probably they are maybe they are not around, maybe they travel out of the country, they are not contacted, and they are not visible. We are not seeing them. But the number is quite insignificant. It's less than 10% or thereabout of the people that have been paid. Over 95% or so have been paid.
If we can afford to keep them, let's keep them. Let's work around it. And we said that this approach of keeping them and still getting high value out of that society, out of that community, is win-win for all. Why should we stick to our own gun and say that, no, we have the power, they should move? How can somebody be living in Lassa and say you should go and resettle in Ekwe? It's quite the same thing. If they don't have choice, they will take it. But we are not building a good society for our country. It's not good.
Communities like Maroko who have moved to Ilasan and Ikota, it's really hard to find closure. And I think the action by Ilasan residents to accept a payoff at this time, 35 years later, is simply one of resigned acceptance. They want closure. Ikota insisting on Ikota for Ikota is also an attempt for them to claim dignity and to ensure that development is inclusive.
Speak with one voice. So that slogan of build Ikota in Ikota and for Ikota people is real now. Because you cannot take us away from here. Let us speak with one voice. Let us come together so that the slogan, our slogan, can come to reality. That build in Ikota and for Ikota people. If you want to build Ikota, build it in batches and move us. Because it's like you are having an agreement with us. You ask us to leave Ikota before you can build Ikota for us. At the end of the day, if nothing comes out of it, we are gone. So, if you know you want to build Ikota, now if we have about 300 people that need to be settled, build it batch by batch, phase by phase, so that we're moving us there. That is the state we are now.
So on the other side, which is the Ikota side, that is where we also have some of them. And these HFP buildings, like one bedroom that they now turn to like 2 bedroom, 3 bedroom, we have them there. And that area is also divided into like 2, 3. We have areas that are well and properly built. We are not touching them. Actually, we have asked them to come forward. For Mr. Governor said we should look at their papers and see how we can ratify those ones. Then those who are on the highland, we are looking at a possibility of Ikota for Ikota. Then we have those that just have to remove.
The Ikota community has been in talks with a private developer introduced by the state government, reaching a verbal agreement for redevelopment that would allow them to stay. But years of broken promises have bred deep mistrust, and the lack of a formal written agreement has stalled all progress.
So government in its own way, we may not have gotten to the standard you will have what wish us, but compare with the past, we have done better, far better, because we do talk to them, we negotiate, we talk. They easily come here. If they have issue now, they call me. No, there are some people moving. No, we go in there and stop. That's I said, there are always there are so many agencies. So really, they want to they raise alarm. We go there and try to protect them.
On the part of government, the shift is a better option than the hard stance of these people do not deserve to be in the city, or they don't deserve to live in these kinds of places simply because they're challenges. But we have come to a phase where people are able to sit table of discussion and come to an agreement. It may not be a win-win situation, but at least it works.
The same justifications used in 1990 are a living blueprint for displacement in Lagos. Sanitation, security, and urban modernization are echoed today as new communities are erased. The pattern of clearing valuable land occupied by the poor for elite development continues unabated.
The same thing has happened in Maroko, the same thing has happened in Lobbying, the same thing has happened across Lagos State. So I think these demolitions follow a certain playbook. And the certain playbook is what I think is a public-private collaboration to actualize some of these evictions.
Actually, waterfront communities are considered prime real estate, and most waterfront local communities are at risk of eviction because of the perceived higher land value. And that's why we have places like Otodokbame being destroyed, 30,000 people rendered homeless, Maroko for one, 300,000 people impacted, and so many other communities, giving way for luxury real estate development. It is an anomaly. It shouldn't be, because these places are places of heritage. They are places where people have dreams, aspirations, where people work, and centuries of memories of, hard work just become wasted, just become, desecrated, disintegrated, because we want to place luxury real estate, gentrification, if we want to use a nice word, in front, at the heart of the city.
One of the deepest wounds in Lagos's eviction story is the failure of the courts. For evictees, justice isn't found in rulings, but across generations. From bulldozers to court injunctions, communities have faced a legal system blocked by power and indifference.
The law courts have tried to provide some clarification, to provide some guidance to the executive arms of government on how they should follow and interpret this law. Unfortunately, we are running a kind of democracy where the executive is too powerful. Sometimes the judicial arms of government are not strong enough to control the actions of the executive. And that is why forced evictions have persisted. People have used the courtrooms to approach, to seek legal redress, and not much has happened because of the excessive amount of powers that the executive arm of government is wielding.
When judgments become suggestions, the rule of law collapses. For waterfront dwellers, the courtroom is another demolition site, just quieter.
In the courts, there have been times that the courts will grant an order and say, parties, rest action, let us look into these issues. But the demolitions have continued. So that is why I think the most dangerous part of the style of democracy we're pursuing is where the executive feels and acts too powerful to be tamed by the judiciary. So when you say democracy is guarded by a strong institution, that strong institution is the judicial arm of government, which can tame executive lawlessness. And I think that is where the gap in our democratic practice is.
Speaking of gaps, when a community is displaced, More than homes are lost, a cultural void is created, a city's memory is erased, and with it, the people's identity, traditions, sacred spaces, and ways of life are severed.
So one of the problems of urban displacement is cultural disruption. A very good example is some of these things that happen in Maroko. So Maroko is an enclave on its own, and I've seen research has shown that the first language in Maroko is not Yoruba, even though Maroko is in a Yoruba dominated city. So you see a lot of people speaking Ogu alone when you go to Maroko. They tend also to transmit this to their children. So you see children speaking Ogu conveniently without even learning how to speak Yoruba. And when they do that, they learn their culture, they learn their identity, they retain all these things, and they pass it from one generation to another.
However, displacement often leads to the loss of language, oral traditions, and cultural practices, as these communities become disintegrated through evictions. Traditional markets, once vibrant hubs of tangible heritage, have also become casualties of this ongoing erasure.
In local markets are shrines, are places of significance, of historic and cultural significance, and they are also places of worship for custodians of our culture.
Recently, the kind of urban displacement that happened at Ojuelegba now has seen the Ojuelegba shrine removed from that place. So, and then when that kind of a thing happens, it affects the cultural practice of that particular group of people that make reference to Elegbara shrine, because Elegbara is the Elegbara shrine and is an ancient heritage of Lagosians. If we keep on losing some of these things, we keep on losing ourselves, we keep on losing our memories, we keep on losing who we are. So the government should be also very mindful about how they just want to develop everywhere at the detriment of so many other indigenous concepts.
There is need for us to safeguard our cultural heritage because that is our identity as a people. And so within the planning process, cultural impact assessment or heritage impact assessment can be one of the boxes to be ticked when we're thinking about change of use or urban development. The planning process can incorporate that, and so that we are able to kind of appreciate, value, and protect our built environment heritage.
It has been a century of displaced hopes and vanished heritage, a story that must not continue. For no matter our status, our aspirations should never be buried beneath the rubble.
The implications of displacement don't end at the point of destruction of a community. It has a ripple effect that can carry on for many decades after.
This experience cannot wipe away from people like us until we go to our grave. Today my father is no more. Even myself that witnessed it, this experience cannot wipe away. There's nothing, even if they build mansion for me, it does not change the trauma that I went through. It does not change the narrative, it does not change what I've seen, what I've experienced. It can't. It can only, like, I've tried, or we have tried to make some headway. But does it really change what they have cost me? It doesn't.
And the government can still make right some of those mistakes by not letting the memory or even the name of that place die. Maroko is Maroko. If you can rename one or two things there, it might be just a roundabout, like that Lake Phase 1 roundabout, you call it Maroko roundabout. Something to just tell the people who lost lives, livelihood, resources, investments, income, families, future. The only thing that was left standing after demolition was just a police station. Everything was leveled to the ground, all the schools. I think there was an inventory. I can find that of all the things that were taken down in Maroko. The least we can do is not to say you don't matter, you never existed. Just to immortalize that area as a mark of recognition that there was at some point in history we didn't do right, but now we're determined to do right.
Immediately we begin to put value on every soul, then our attitude towards them will change. Nobody wants to live in slum. No one wants to live in slum. But immediately we see that they are nuisance. Where are they there in the first instance? Where do we want them to be that you are not?
The future of Lagos is already being built, and so we have to ask ourselves this question: who is the city for? Is it for the people or is it for profit? Is it going to be built on the back of social and spatial displacement that we see today? Or is it going to be an inclusive metropolis where everybody, rich and poor, migrant and indigene, are able to achieve their highest potential in a city that belongs to all?